Hi, hello, I hope you're taking care of yourself. If you're new here, my name is Lexi, and I am currently working on a couple of different videos about some books that I read in medium bad faith right now. When will they come out? When they're done, and no sooner, okay? That's just kind of how it works for the feature film-length videos that I occasionally decide to make for some reason on this channel, but they're both pretty fun, so I think that they'll be worth it, hopefully. I'm also trying to do a better job of not going like completely off-grid on this channel whenever I work on a project like that. So today I thought that I would take a little bit of a break and do this cool vlog format that I haven't done for a couple of years, where together we will discover if I still have my finger on the pulse, so to speak, if the masses can be trusted. In this video, I'm going to be reading the highest rated and lowest rated books that I physically own. I'm using ratings from Goodreads for this. Whenever I buy a book, I go into this little spreadsheet that I have on Notion, and I put some stuff about it into the spreadsheet, including the Goodreads rating whenever I buy the book, which means like, is this a perfect system? Is this even remotely accurate? No, it's a bunch of different snapshots of a bunch of different books at different times. But you know what? It works for the premise of this video. The last time that I did this, I read The Will of the Many for the first time, which I loved. I really liked that book despite its many cliches. And then I also read YN, which I do wish that I could take back. That book was excruciating. So it was a good split, I think, in terms of entertainment value for you guys. But this time, the genres are a little bit different, which I think is kind of fun. By a decent amount, the lowest rated book that I own right now is a book called The List by Yomi Adegoke. It's got a premise that reminds me a little bit of the Zendaya movie, The Drama, from this last year. I'll just read you the blurb. It's pretty short. Ola Olajide, a celebrated journalist at Women magazine, Women with 3 X's, is set to marry the love of her life in 1 month's time. Young, beautiful, and successful, she and her fiancé, Michael, are considered the couple goals of their social network and seem to have it all. That is until one morning when they both wake up to the same message. Oh my God, have you seen The List? It began as a crowdsourced collection of names and somehow morphed into an anonymous account posting allegations on social media. Ola would usually be the first to support such a list. She'd retweet it, call for the men to be fired, write article after article, except this time, Michael's name is on it. This is tagged on Goodreads as a thriller, so we'll see what that means. I mean, I don't think that the premise of this book sounds very much like a thriller. It sounds more like dramatic literary fiction to me, but I'm sure it's got that tag for a reason, and we will discover together if that reason is a good one or if it just makes me feel baited and a little bit upset. It's kind of been a while since I've read a good thriller, so I shouldn't, like, I really shouldn't, but I do have some amount of hopes for this despite the premise of this video. This has a 2.99 on Goodreads, which for the uninitiated is really bad. Goodreads is a place where people tend to give out 5-star ratings like candy, generally. So even though in my personal scale, 3 stars isn't bad, it's the rating that I tend to give to books that were just average, forgettable experiences where, I don't know, maybe they kind of wasted my time because they made basically no impact on me, but like they were otherwise completely fine. And they're usually books that I think there is an audience that I would for sure recommend them for, even if it wasn't me. That's how I tend to feel about a book that I give 3 stars, but for a lot of people on Goodreads, 3 stars is the rating that you give to a book that like murdered your entire family and then burned down your house afterwards, which tends to skew the average for books pretty far away from a standard distribution. I think that most books on Goodreads tend to fall somewhere between a 3.7 and a 4.1. That can vary a little bit based on genre, but most of the time that's what you're looking at. So with all of that said, less than 3 is really bad, and I'm intrigued to see what exactly this book does so wrong that led it to such a dark and low place. I imagine it's got to be something to do with the politics. Like, the blurb is so obviously in direct conversation with the Me Too movement that I can only assume that the author probably just gets something horribly wrong. Like, that to me, that is what I tend to see lead to a lot of low ratings on a book like this. This is what I'll be reading first, but just so you know what to expect. And also because, I don't know, man, like I have 10 hours ahead of me to record this video, and this book is pretty short. I might actually get to the other book today, the highest rated book that I own right now, or at least the highest rated fiction book, because I do have an essay collection that is rated higher than this, but I kind of want to read fiction for this video. And you know what? My house, my rules, or whatever. The highest rated fiction book that I have right now is The Lion Women of Tehran, which is actually really nice because I read the first 5 pages of this book on a plane in the last year and then immediately put it down by accident. Like, I think I just got wrapped in with something else and I never picked it back up again. So this gives me an excuse to go back. This is a historical fiction novel that follows these 2 girls who grew up together in Iran during the 1950s, and they were super close friends up until they had this big falling out that split them apart forever. Since then, many years have passed. They've been living separate lives up until one of the girls, Homa, sends the other girl, Ellie, a letter. After decades of not speaking. And in this letter, she's like, the two of us have to talk. I have something important to tell you. And Allie, upon receiving it, is kind of flung into reliving, both for herself and for us, the audience, all of her memories of this friendship, both from when they were together and then from the many years when they were apart. This book is probably really sad. This is setting off my this is sad alarm, and it has a 4.47 on Goodreads, which if 2.99 is very, very bad, 4.47 is extremely good, especially if you're a standalone historical fiction novel. Like, typically those are the ratings that you see going to like later books inside of a fantasy series where all of the people who hated the first books just don't keep reading. So the only people who are reviewing them are people who were already fans to begin with. So that's pretty cool. That's something to look forward to either later today or tomorrow. But I am going to get started. You can consider this to be a spoiler-free vlog for now. If I end up changing my mind on that, I will give you ample warning in case you're interested in reading one of these books. But before we actually get into it, I just have a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, which is SURI. This might surprise you, but it turns out that brushing your teeth sort of matters. It's sort of one of the most important things that you can possibly do if you want to continue having teeth as you get older. And it's maybe a little bit embarrassing to admit, but especially when I was a teenager, I had a lot of trouble sticking to a consistent oral hygiene routine. And I have since found as an adult that the only way to make me consistently do anything is to make it as enjoyable as possible, which is a big reason why I've become such a big fan of SURI. SURI makes electric toothbrushes that are not only extremely effective at doing the whole cleaning thing that toothbrushes are supposed to do, but they're also really pretty. I really like the green. They are lighter and better designed, in my opinion, and they have a smaller form factor than some of the other similar products that I've tried in the past. They also send you this magnet that you can use just by sticking it onto your mirror, and it saves you whatever counter space is usually dedicated to your toothbrush, which is really nice. And all of that together just makes brushing my teeth into this really like simple, enjoyable activity, which again, very important for me if I want to maintain a habit as a dopamine-seeking adult. It is critical in life, I think, to make self-care into something that you look forward to, and to find rituals like that are just a good part of your day that you never want to overlook. And this is one of mine. If you are interested in giving SURI a try, you can use the link in my description or scan this QR that's going to be floating somewhere over here. And you can use my code Lexi15 to get 15% off SURI, and you'll see why I love it so much. Thank you so much to SURI for sponsoring this video. I really appreciate it. Let's get back to it. Okay, hello. It's been like an hour and a half since I started, and I'm through part 1, which is maybe a fourth of the way through the book. I will in fact be spoiling this one, I think, because it's kind of impossible to have a conversation about what's going on inside of this book without kind of spoiling some major parts of it. So yeah, if that's going to bother you, you've been warned. You know, this isn't like awful. I mean, I do find it to be a lot less excruciating than Y/N, for example, just in terms of writing. The author is definitely competent as a writer, with an asterisk that I do think this book is trying pretty hard to be like hip and cool and progressive in a way that sometimes cool girl fiction, hot girl books can do. This feels like it was written in a style that is meant to appeal to the anti-capitalist, anti-corporate, corporate girly who like works in an office in media in New York City because she's come to terms with the fact that she can't fix the system alone, but she still wants to do as much good as possible and pursue her dreams within it anyways, despite its cost. But also, in order to not go insane with cognitive dissonance, she like only buys thrifted clothes and virtue signals inside of coffee shops with her laptop stickers, just so nobody thinks that she's actually okay with the way things are, because she feels really guilty about not just like going off the grid and living off the land instead of making some media billionaire somewhere even more money off of her creative work, regardless of what good it might be doing otherwise inside of the world. Wow, that was a lot. I don't even mean any of that maliciously either, because like alternate universe, that's me if I was forced to work a corporate job. I don't know, man. I think that we all do what we have to do to like try to find meaning and survive without killing ourselves. But my point is, this book feels so much like it was written for exactly that audience, to the point where it's almost like a caricature of all of the things that you tend to see in the hot girl contemporary fiction genre. For example, the main character talks about how when her friends discuss Game of Thrones inside of their shared group chat, she, quote, wanted no part in what to her sounded like The Lord of the Rings with a dark sexual violence arc and a dash of casual ableism. I got more. I'll edit this in. Alla's colleague, Sophie Chambers, had been the first hire of the original core woke force of 3, which Frankie had since quadrupled. Sophie was a stylish, social media savvy journalist who had accrued a thriving online presence of over 80,000 followers on Twitter, courtesy of #CastrateTheStraights. 2 paragraphs later. Today, Ala headed up the current affairs desk, but back then she struggled to make ends meet as a freelancer, doing 6 months maternity cover at a now-defunct digital news site while writing about sex and relationships on her now-defunct blog, comethefuckthrough.com. 1 paragraph later, at times, Ala felt conscious about her role as the black one, but imagined Kieran and Sophie felt the same about their obvious roles as the Asian and gay one too. After Kieran came out, Frankie began to joke that she could have single-handedly filled women's diversity quota, since Kieran was pansexual, British Indian, and dyspraxic. If I'd have known, I wouldn't have bothered with Sophie or Ala. I got a handful of the letters in both LGBT and BAME in one go with Kieran. It's like I'm on bloody countdown. She repeated a version of this gag at every staff party once she'd had a few, as if she wasn't sure that they'd heard it the last time because they hadn't laughed. Like, the whole book is kind of like that, man, and in small doses, maybe it's a little funny. I do think it's kind of funny how much of a grifter her boss is, for example. But at the same time, it's like, it gets to a point. Crazy, I know, but I like it when books talk about difficult social and cultural things. I like that about reading, but I don't really like it when books feel compelled to make sure that they check the box of every single modern discourse point in order to establish the author as a good leftist who, like, acknowledges such things. I feel like it ends up just becoming kind of meaningless when you do that. It's like you're regurgitating my entire social media feed at me while I'm reading a book, and I know for a fact that some of it is meant to be a bit. Like what I'm about to say about how it references this core dissonance inside of Ala's character, that's true, but also I don't know where the line is, right? Like, I don't know how much of it is supposed to be part of a bit, and I don't know how much of it is supposed to be low-key serious, which means that whatever critique is trying to be made here, like, it's not nearly sharp enough to function. Anyways, back to Past Me. There's probably some amount of irony there, because the main character's whole thing is that she is a prolific online feminist, right? Like, she's a journalist who writes these stories that are championing women's rights, women's health, victims of violence from men, and she's got this very socially conscious, progressive worldview. I'm sure that she would describe herself as very principled, but she's also the fiance of Michael, who, if you remember from the blurb, is on The List, which is a Google Doc where a bunch of women anonymously submitted reports to the list of all of the men inside of the world of media in England who have done bad things to them. And the bad things on the list range dramatically from things like generally being sexist to being creepy in a way that is not really described further, to also just full-on essay. Like, all of these entries are just next to each other on the list, and Michael is there for, direct quote, harassment and threatening behavior / physical assault at office Christmas party, and then in brackets, restraining order, which is, I think, intentionally by the author, not a sex crime, and we're going to come back to that, I'm sure, probably a little bit later when I've read a little bit more of the book, if I don't get to it right now. But yeah, I mean, the dissonance between how Ala would react to anybody else in her life being accused of this kind of thing versus how she reacts when it's her partner is meaningful, right? Like, even though most of the time she has an extremely strong sense of right and wrong, she's also a complicated person with complicated feelings. Like, she is inherently going to see this situation in shades of gray because that's her partner of many, many years who she thinks would never do something like that. But as Ala herself acknowledges, isn't that kind of always the case for everyone who knows someone who does a bad thing to a woman, but apparently who didn't know them well enough to know that that was a possibility? You know, it's just interesting to be inside of the mind of a character who knows all of the right things to believe and who does believe them, but who is just still struggling under the weight of all of these revelations to actually, like, see that they apply to her own life. Navigating all of those fucked up, thorny feelings is an interesting thought experiment. How do you decide who to believe when it's between a single anonymous report on a Google Doc that goes viral versus the love of your life who is begging you to trust him and begging you to believe that it's not true? Like, how do you start to feel all the way safe with that person again, even if there is evidence that that's not the case? But here's the thing. Yeah, I mean, none of it is true. The book is dual POV, and half of the chapters that we're getting are from Michael's perspective. And unless we're getting some extreme, unreliable narrator silly business, he didn't do it. Like, he actually is not guilty of what he was accused of doing. So we do, in fact, have yet another piece of media that is, for some reason, about a woman who has falsely accused a man of violence. Like, it's what I expected, guys. I mean, I saw this coming, like, a mile away, given the premise and the ratings for this book. And I will say, okay, I do think that this is a topic that you could theoretically write a compelling book about. I do think that it's possible. It's just something that I have never seen in media. I've never seen anyone who's tried this nonsense get it right. What I was talking about earlier with how Allah's reaction to this, I do think is pretty interesting because it forces you to examine the cognitive dissonance between like what you think of a person and what you know could be true. And I think that there's something there in looking at a story where that person doesn't handle things perfectly because it's like impossible to kind of handle those situations perfectly. Like there is truth to prospect. You can write a good story about a false accusation. I'm sure it's possible. I have just never seen it done. It's just a really, really thorny topic where if you're not handling it with care, you're just feeding into these really harmful talking points about women who just lie for no reason and cancel innocent men and ruin their whole lives. They were so promising. It's so hard to write something like this that doesn't somewhere fall into that trap that I don't really think that it's worth writing about unless you really feel like you have something fresh and novel to say. And I am just kind of pessimistic right now, 70 pages into this book, that this author will end up having something valuable enough to say to make all of what has preceded it worth it. Mainly this is because Michael fucking sucks, man. He sucks a lot, and I'm not sure yet whether we are meant to acknowledge that and like root for his life to fall apart anyways, even though women lie, or if we're meant to sympathize with him because even though he's done bad things, look how much he loves his fiance. He's changed. Don't we all deserve the opportunity to change and grow? You know, like I'm not really sure where we're meant to be going with this right now. And I don't know, maybe I just hate both directions of that given the premise here, because if we're meant to sympathize with him, writing a book about an evil woman who spreads lies and tries to ruin this poor man's life even though he's reformed, I don't know, man. I think that's kind of weird. But also on the other hand, writing a book where he does suck, but then he's punished not for the reasons he sucks, but instead for unrelated crimes that are made up by a lying woman who lies. I don't know, I also kind of think that that's not my favorite thing either. We'll see. This is not a thriller, by the way. This is very much like contemporary fiction. Maybe it'll go in a completely different direction. Maybe we're going off the rails and everything I'm saying is like what this book would have done in a genre that is not what it actually will be in further parts of the story. TLDR on why Michael sucks. First of all, he has a podcast, which has to be on purpose because the author is flagging, again, a lot of awareness of social issues. So she must know that writing a book where your male main character has a podcast with his boys, like, she's got to know that that's a bit of a red flag. But beyond that, in terms of his more concrete sins, he just now realizes live in this book that maybe following a bunch of women on the street growing up, maybe that was like a bad thing to do, that could maybe even be classed as harassment. Maybe using girls in college for sex and then being mean to them afterwards, like maybe that reflected somewhat poorly upon him, you know, maybe all of his exes thinking that he's a piece of shit. What if maybe actually he was a piece of shit? In his POV chapters, you're watching this man reckon in real time with this idea that maybe he actually kind of was woaded and not goated, like he so badly wanted to believe that he was, but also he's changed and that's all in the past and he's better now, which doesn't make me like him more. I don't think I'm meant to really, but I don't know. But in terms of things with Allah, because he's also not innocent there, towards the beginning of their relationship, he cheated on her and she chose to stay with him. They worked through it. It's now been years. Whatever. I mean, say what you will, right? I would not have stayed with him, but they've worked through it allegedly, except also the most recent reveal right at the end of the first part, our cliffhanger going into the next section of the story, is that he's also had this long-term emotional affair. That's what he calls it, even though they were apparently sexting, which to me means that we have transcended to just straight up an affair, even though, I mean, both are bad, don't get me wrong, but whatever. He's had this long-term emotional affair with this other woman named Jackie that he would exchange messages with whenever, quote, he and Allah fell out or he felt rejected, which was more often than he cared to admit. Charming. And that, by the way, is the girl that he is fairly certain has falsely accused him as some form of revenge for, I'm sure, the way that he completely somehow mishandled her feelings as well in this situation. I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if that wasn't true. Again, I've got a lot of book left. Maybe things are different. I don't know. Maybe he actually did do it. Maybe this is going somewhere completely different than where I'm expecting it to go. I just kind of have a bad feeling. I just have a sinking feeling that this book is going to be a lot more like gossip drama slop than it will be a serious book book with serious things to say, which, given that you're writing about the Me Too movement, even if you're not naming it, I don't know, man. I think that making that into drama slop, even if it's not intentional, it's just kind of a weird thing to do, but I'm gonna keep going. Hopefully this gets better. You will be the first to know, I'm sure.
Long before they met, the odd blog post of hers would be floated into the group chat, punctuated with a solitary thoughts next to the eyes emoji. This is Michael's group chat with his podcast boys in relation to photos of Allah. Amani and Sioun's commentary usually started and stopped at the headline, bemoaning, quote, feminist agendas, and concluding most of her problems, if not women's worldwide, could be fixed with, quote, pipe. Now and then, Michael found himself retrospectively livid at how they used to speak about the woman he intended to marry. Once they started dating, his friend stopped the jokes. But remembering made him pissed off. At himself, at them. They weren't bad boys, his boys. But wasn't that the issue? Why was not bad so often good enough? Dude, this is every paragraph in this book. I feel like I'm watching a man realize in real time that women are people, and I just, don't find that to be a compelling use of my time. There's zero subtlety to it at all. It's super didactic. Here's the right thing to think in this moment. See, he's learning and changing, and he might be a cheating cheater who cheats, and on occasion also a lying liar who lies, but aren't we all? Aren't we all? See, he too can realize that women are people. And again, it's I know that I think that this is tongue-in-cheek from the author. I don't really think that she wants you to like him. I'm siding towards she doesn't want you to like him. But again, it's all this and for what? What am I supposed to get from this book? I don't know, man. I don't feel challenged by any of this. I just feel kind of annoyed.
Hi guys, I'm at the end of part 2, which is about 75% of the way through the book. Where to begin? Most of the things that I expected to go wrong in this book have in fact gone wrong, along with a couple of other things. The best way that I can describe the reading experience of this book is I kind of feel like I'm being beaten over the head with a blunt object, except I don't even really know what the blunt object is. It could be a really big rock, it could be a hammer, it could be a marble bust of some kind of obscure Greek god, it could be a fucking garden gnome, man. I don't know. And it doesn't even really matter what it is, because either way, I feel a little bit concussed. I don't know what we're here to do. Sometimes I feel like this book is on the verge of trying to say something meaningful, and then we learn that Jackie, Michael's former mistress, who probably submitted him to the list, Jackie is so crazy. She is so out of this universe that when Michael ghosted her in the middle of their second affair, because I don't think I've mentioned this yet, because it's not even really relevant, but Jackie is also who he slept with at the beginning of him and Allah's relationship. That's who he cheated on her with. And then they had the torrid, emotional affair in the middle of their relationship, a year and a half later or whatever. But she's so crazy that after he ghosted her, she threatened to throw acid into his face, and also into his mother's face as well, because just him, not enough. Clearly the kind of behavior that you're going to see from evil, lying women who lie. But again, what's really frustrating is that the book does have moments where it does seem, again, like it's going to say something meaningful, where Allah is having this conversation with a young girl who wants to go into her field about the abuse that girl had faced from a man in a position of power inside of the industry, and Allah's thinking about her own experiences. She's thinking about the men in her life, right, who have abused her in ways that, even if they weren't super serious, they've stuck with her. They were still abuses. And the book reckons for a moment about whether all of the other things that Allah has ever done in her career for women are less important than what she is doing right now by being potentially complicit in the abuse of women at the hands of her partner, at the hands of her future husband. If it means she can look girls like this poor 19-year-old or whatever in the eye and tell them that she believes in them, right? Is it okay to do that when you're complicit, maybe even in the systems that you claim to stand against? These are interesting conversations. I don't know. That's a part of the book that's kind of good. But then in the middle of this fucking conversation, actually in the middle of two pieces of dialogue where this young girl is recounting her abuse, Allah's colleague unironically says, patriarchy is gonna patriarch. What? What are we doing, dude? You are not serious. This is not a serious book. And I can't tell in these moments if these are supposed to be bits of levity that are like infused through the text to make the book kind of funny even when it's uncomfortable. But they're happening in moments that are supposed to be serious, where you're supposed to be exploring the actual themes of the story, the point of why you are writing this book. And it's like you're weaving in the dumbest shit of all time. Michael's friends are also the worst, by the way, which like you probably could have predicted by the fact that they also have a podcast that they all do together, but I'm here to tell you about it anyways, because Michael goes and tells them about the list, right? He like finally admits to his friends that this bad thing has happened that they know nothing about, of course, because there are men outside of this space. And immediately they're like, not only the list is wrong about you, the list is also probably wrong about everyone else, especially about the celebrities on the list that we like. It doesn't know shit. And also, you know what? I feel like we've been too hard on Chris Brown. Hasn't Chris Brown been through enough? Can't we be done with that? And like, duh, it's supposed to be on the nose. Men are complicit in abuse. They say and do bad things and don't actually care when it's their friends or whatever. But again, my question to you is, and for what? Why are we doing this? What exactly am I supposed to take from this? This is not a sharp, incisive observation about society, dude. This is the shit I see on the internet every single day. Derogatory. But it's actually worse than that, because I struggle to believe that a woman like Ala would choose to be with a guy who is friends with this kind of people and who actively participates in their nonsense. Like, there's a moment where she reflects inside of her internal monologue about how she didn't like how Michael would sit idly by when two of his friends would say dumb shit on the podcast. But it's like, then what attracted you to him? Like why are you with him? And I get it, okay? I get it, right? I've read the book. I get that this is supposed to be another thing that she's hypocritical about, where she positions herself in her career and in her life as this extremely progressive person, but ultimately she is a lot more complicated and maybe has some character flaws that like allow her to lower her standards for the most subpar man I've ever seen in my life. But again, and for what? Like what am I supposed to take away from that, dude? It happens in the world. This occurs. Yeah, I know that. I know that plenty of women let the men in their lives do dumb shit and look down on them. Or if they're not specifically looking down on them, they're letting the men in their lives look down on their partners. You know, like, I'm aware that that happens. I would like you now to say something of value, please. I would like you to share with the class why you felt compelled to write an entire book about it, because I am 75% of the way through and I'm still not sure what the answer to that question is. I'm also bored at this point, which I think is probably the main reason why I sound a lot more mad in this update than I did in the last update, because at least at that point I assumed that more shit would happen. Like, I assumed that even if I'm not getting a very thoughtful book, at least I'm getting something that is kooky crazy and entertaining. But no, dude, a total of 2 things have happened in this entire 140-page section, okay? Do you want to hear them? I'll tell you. Number 1, one of the men on the list, who was also accused, reached out to Michael to meet with him. And this guy's name is Lewis. He's like a super famous retired soccer player who is probably in his 40s or something now, but he was accused of extreme homophobia and abuse. And when the two of them meet up, Lewis is like, yeah, don't worry, never abused anyone. That's completely a lie, but I was admittedly extremely homophobic. But it's kind of complicated considering the fact that I'm also gay, which, yeah, I mean, it is kind of complicated considering the fact that you're also gay. Why are we doing this for like 3 pages in the middle of this book? Especially when the accusations, in his case, are also from a lying woman who lies. They're from the alleged junkie sister of his ex-boyfriend, who is threatening to out him if he doesn't wire her $100,000. 2 lying women who lie inside of 1 book, and they're both crazy and evil. Like, wow, what are the odds? So yeah, that happened. And then thing number 2 that occurred during this section, Ala and Michael still get married. Ala goes through with the wedding, from what I can tell, mostly out of inertia, because again, nothing is happening really inside of this section of the book. Mostly both of them inside of their respective POVs are just writhing and agonizing over how miserable they are. And then in Michael's POV, he's also again learning that women are people and reconsidering considering some of his past actions using this new knowledge that he now has. And then in Allah's point of view, Allah is reckoning with the fact that on the low, she's a bit of a hypocrite and she doesn't know what to do with that, because I mean, it's hard to know what to do with the fact that the person that you love most in the world, you might not actually know very much about them at all. This book would just be better, I think, if Michael's POV was cut entirely. It still wouldn't be good, I don't think. Allah does not make good decisions, which isn't a deal breaker itself, but again, mostly I just kind of don't get it. I don't see the ant for what. I don't get what I'm supposed to take away from her deciding, hey, you know what, let's just stand by him after all, because I love him, and that feeling doesn't just go away. Michael is still lying to her at this point. He still hasn't told her about Jackie, you know, the lying woman who lies and who put them in this position apparently. And I kind of think that when this inevitably all comes out in the last part of this book, I think that Allah is still going to stay with him based on where she's at right now. I feel like we're currently on a one-way collision track with that weird, uncomfortable, every couple has secrets, aren't we all just a little bit fucked up sort of ending that I think you get a lot more often in thrillers, which this book is definitely not, by the way. I don't know who is out here taking this book on Goodreads as a thriller, but they lied to you. They lied to me. I don't know, man. I'm sick of it. Hear me out. I honestly think that this is just notes on an execution, but 10 times worse. Michael is obviously a better guy than Ansel, the serial killer inside of that book, for obvious reasons. I mean, Michael is a shithead in a much more mundane way, but in the same way that that book, which is one of my favorite pieces of literary suspense that I've ever read, is reckoning with the impact of this behavior, not only on this person, but also on the women in his life who still love him anyways. Like, I think that that book is beautiful and moving and really challenging in all of the difficult, complicated feelings it forces you as a reader to hold inside of your heart at the same time for these characters who do like insane bad things, right? But are kind of also still people. That book is so good at all of those things. And this book is so bad. It is so bad at all of the same things, dude. It is the worst version of all of those themes applied to the most nothing burger of a man that I've ever seen. No redeeming qualities other than we're told that he's goofy and has a certain joie de vivre that we don't actually see because he's so busy being depressed and, you know, deciding whether or not he wants to continue walking on this planet after everything that's happened to him. But in every other case, everything else that we've learned about him, like he's a cheater, he's a liar, he's lazy and lame, and he has a podcast that they used to have a segment on his podcast where every quarter they would rate celebrities based solely on their butts. They called it Cakes of the Quarter. Like this is the kind of guy that we're talking about here. And you know, he's nice to his family and he does love Allah, I guess, even though he also clearly does a lot of things to hurt her. But there are still moments inside of his internal monologue where you're like, wow, even the dirtbags are just, you know, trying their best to survive and find joy in these trying times. And yeah, I mean, that's true, but it also doesn't make me like him. And unlike in Notes, I don't think that this guy is going to die at the end of this book. So there's no complicated feelings of justice, really. I mean, I don't buy even that his entire life is over. Like, at this point, I don't even think that Allah is going to leave him. Maybe I'm wrong, man. Maybe it'll all come together inside of the last few pages of this book, but I haven't been wrong yet, so I kind of just don't think so. Most recent update is that they got married, and on their wedding day, for some reason, even though Michael is getting actively dogpiled online, the two of them decide to have a public wedding hashtag. And I don't know if I've mentioned this yet. It wasn't really relevant to most of the other things I've said so far, but they are described in this book as like a paragon in the local British Black community. Like a bunch of photos of them being together went viral at some point, and the two of them have, I don't know if it's a couple's account or if it's just his posts about the two of them that go viral, but they've accrued like tens of thousands of followers who really idolize them as a couple. They're both like pseudo public figures in the media space, so their wedding is kind of like a royal wedding of sorts for the Black community, and people liked them a lot before the hashtag list dropped and just turned everything upside down for them. But since then, for obvious reasons, the two of them have gone ghost, but they still think to themselves, I guess, yeah, let's have a hashtag. Let's make this wedding blow the fuck up on socials. I don't know about that personally. I would not do that, I don't think, in this situation. It really does reveal a lack of foresight. Anyways, that backfires, and now it's getting getting brigaded by a bunch of people who are reposting this image that calls Michael an abuser and Alla complicit in said abuse, except they've told everyone at the wedding about this hashtag, and they have like a projector playing all of the images that people are supposed to be posting that are supposed to be cute little candids from the wedding. This projector is playing automatically the hashtag images, and so now everyone at the wedding knows what's going on, including Michael and Alla's chronically offline parents and extended family members who live in Ghana and Nigeria. So yeah, that's cooked. You probably could have prevented some of that from happening if you ask me, but what the fuck do I know? I mean, the author needed a plot device to make their parents find out about this, I guess. So yeah, that's it though. That's all that happened. 140 pages. That's all I got to share. The rest has really just been the two of them writhing in agony in their own complementary ways. I am going to have some corn chowder, a little bit of soup, and I'm going to finish this book. Yeah, wish me luck.
Okay, I'm done. I'm gonna sleep on it.
Hello, what's up? It's the next day. So this didn't have the worst possible ending that it could have had, but it was close. Let's start with the positives. Alla does leave him. She breaks up with him after she finds out about Jackie too. Honestly, this book has more of an epilogue than half of the romance novels I feel like I've read in the past couple of years. We get at the end this full year time skip, and we get to find out how all of the characters are doing. And Alla and Michael are kind of friends at this point. They're going out for coffee, but they're not together anymore. They're not going to get back together, and that was good. I liked that. I found that to be kind of a welcome surprise given how Alla acts inside of the rest of this. But with that said, everything else I liked less than that. Lewis, that closeted soccer player who calls Michael to go and meet with him, he ends up taking his own life after he posts on the internet that he didn't do what he was accused of, and he ends up getting brigaded for it. You know, not even the list, man. Not even the list is safe when it comes to the inevitability of a dead gay man. No, but actually, I felt absolutely nothing when Lewis died. Like, I don't know this man. I don't know his story beyond, again, his 3 pages that we get earlier in the book. So it doesn't really matter as a reader that he dies. Like, his death mostly just serves as a plot device, especially because it's meant to be this big emotional moment when it's contrasted directly with after Alla breaks up with him and they both lose their jobs. Michael gets absolutely blasted on whiskey and he decides to go and walk into traffic, but he is less successful. He manages to survive where Lewis does not. And after the time skip, he manages to turn it around. He's got this new job as a tutor that he's doing, and he still has some regrets that he talks to Alla about, but things are getting better for him, okay? That's how it ends off in the epilogue. Things are also getting better for Alla as well. But before we unpack that, the last major thing that happens in this book, in the last chapter, is this big twist that recontextualizes the entire story. Oh my goodness. Because during that penultimate chapter, which is the epilogue thing I mentioned, where Alla and Michael are meeting for coffee, they end up running into Jackie in a park, and Alla gets real mad. She starts like chasing her and trying to flag her down, but Jackie is able to escape. And in the last chapter, Jackie goes home and she's pretty shaken up after that experience. And guess what? Turns out it wasn't Jackie at all who submitted accusations against Michael to the list. Jackie was innocent, and in fact, it was instead her evil boyfriend, Aaron. All along, Aaron is the real enemy of peace in this story, and Jackie has no idea that he's done anything, so she's just crying to him because she's so shaken up, and he's consoling her, and she's none the wiser because this man is fucking evil. It was also Aaron, by the way, who texted Michael during the end of Jackie Affair 2 Electric Boogaloo with those death threats where he was like, I am going to hunt you down, and I'm going to throw acid at you, and then also at your mom. That was also Aaron, who is, by the way, one of the only things worse than a real dude bro podcaster, which is a failed wannabe dude bro podcaster. He's like Michael, but even less successful and even less charismatic. And I feel like this ending is supposed to be this gotcha moment where it's like, look, it was actually the evil of men all along that caused this entire situation to go down. And even you, the audience of this book, you thought that Jackie had to be an evil liar who lies just because Michael said that she probably was. Like, you automatically assumed that it had to be the girl, and look how wrong you were. That is the energy I get from this twist. And me personally, I don't really see this as subversive at all. It doesn't change anything about the story to me. Yeah, a man made the false accusation. hands while pretending to be a woman. Oh boy, it's so different. Not really, in my opinion. Especially because Jackie wasn't even the only lying woman who lied inside of this book. Like, Lewis's ex's sister also drove him to overdose. It's not even just Aaron that made a confirmed false accusation. I don't know, man. I just think that this book overall is so muddy in what it is trying to be. Like, I don't think it was worth it. There are parts of this book that I find interesting. Ala loses her job first. She's held to an even higher standard than Michael, even though she's a mostly innocent bystander. And there's something there about how women in general, but especially black women, are held to a much higher standard than the men in their lives. Or like, Ala and Michael both have cheating dads, and Ala ends up breaking that cycle when she's able to break up with Michael, even though it's really hard when he reveals to her that he cheated on her for a second time. There's something there that is valuable. We also see that Salih, Ala's friend, was actually a victim all along of somebody else who was named on the list. And I don't think that this was handled super well after the fact. After the scene where it's revealed, she kind of just goes off screen and then maybe gets better, but we don't really know. But the scene where she shares that with Ala, I think is kind of good. It really recontextualizes how Ala's words and actions defending Michael, and therefore by proxy the other people who were named on the list, would be really re-traumatizing to an actual victim of the other people there. Again, I feel like the seed of something valuable is there, but none of it's enough. These good parts are just moments. They're just blips in a story that is otherwise kind of weirdly apologist to me. The author puts in a bunch of quotes to try to combat that about how, look, all of the other men who were probably definitely perpetrators, unlike the innocent men who we actually learn about, look, they get to keep their jobs and their lives don't even get ruined. Like, isn't that kind of fucked up that they face no consequences? We do get these throwaway sentences to signal that the author is in fact disgruntled whenever men like this just walk away scot-free. But those are just single lines. The author also chose to write a book about how false accusations can ruin a poor man's life. I mean, actually two poor men, if you count the dead gay soccer player. Yeah, the internet is a dark and nasty place, and people blow things out of proportion all of the time when they don't actually know anything other than what one guy said one time on Twitter. It's true. This is a phenomenon that we see all of the time. But I feel like this book focuses a lot more on how fucked up that is, and also how the people who contribute to those brigades are just malicious and two-faced. Like, their takes change like the tides as soon as something goes too far and they want to be on the right side of history again. So they don't even have real opinions in the eyes of the author of this book, which is kind of true a decent amount of the time, but the book is focusing a lot more on that than it does the actual victimization of women, which this isn't a book about someone who gets doxxed and loses everything because they said a slur 15 years ago on Twitter. This is a book about people who have been accused of serious violent harm. That is the central foundation of your premise, and considering that your premise also relies on women and men, I guess, making false allegations for the purposes of revenge, I feel like you kind of have a responsibility to do a good job considering the rhetoric that inevitably you will be feeding into. And I just don't really fuck with the choice to humanize Michael more than characters like Salih, for example, who gets one scene, and then Ala outs her to Michael as a survivor, which is not his business and was not something that she asked permission to do. And then we don't really hear from her again, which retrospectively makes the reveal feel more like a plot twist than an actual serious decision. But Michael gets a whole book, you know? And I mean, yippee, he realizes that women are people by the end. Let me just read you this quote. This is a direct quote from Michael POV. Context is he just finished reading an article that went viral that's by a survivor. If he was honest with himself, reading Noor's letter was the first time that Michael had properly thought about what it must be like to be a woman who would put a man on the list, or a woman who had recognized her abuser on it. How must they have felt every single day, seeing men who assaulted them going scot-free, invalidating the stories that were already hard enough to tell. By the final line, Noor and all the women she and Ala talked of were real to Michael. Wow. Isn't that wonderful? Women Are People challenge finally defeated after only 29 years of just seeing them as NPCs. Anyways, yeah, he goes through a lot of big moments like that inside of this story. But then he's also like, yeah, my red pill incel friends who low-key hate women, I will love those fuck-ups till I die. Like, he actually says that late in the book in his internal monologue. Or like earlier on, I'm also expected to think that he's woke and cool and maybe not as bad as other men because he like shakes his head in disapproval after someone at this meetup that he goes to compares Emmett Till and the Central Park Five to not just all of the men on the list, but also to other famous innocents, such as, you know, P. Diddy and Bill Cosby. Michael doesn't like that. He disapproves and shakes his head, but says nothing. Okay. cool. You're still going to a meetup with these people. And this whole book, I'm trying to understand if I'm meant to like him or not. Like if he's meant to be a sympathetic or an unsympathetic character. And I get to the point where I'm pretty sure we're supposed to not like him. And then in the end, he's written in such a sympathetic way. Oh no, look how regretful he is. Look how miserable he is. Don't you believe me? No? Okay, I'll make him walk into traffic to really prove to you that he's super, super sad. Look at how much this project has failed men like him and also the dead gay guy. Like, look at how the list and the internet have punished him for crimes that he only should have ever been held to account for inside of his personal life. Look at how hard he's working to move on and find joy. Like, I just don't find him to be a particularly interesting character study. I don't come away from this book very convinced by any of the things that I think it was trying to say. And I imagine that's why this book has such a low rating. That and the fact that, again, it was just not entertaining. All of that imperfect messaging, sure, that's a flaw. We can talk about it. But for me, there is almost nothing worse that a book can do than bore me to tears. And that is how I felt probably 70% of the time that I was reading this. So this is likely going to end up somewhere in the ballpark of 1.5 to 2 stars for me, which is in fact a Goodreads 2.99. So in this case, yet again, I think that the people were right about this one. But the next book that I'm going to read, I will hopefully like a little bit more. Back to no spoilers also, especially if I end up liking this book, because usually it's only the books that I don't like that I end up spoiling on this channel, because the ones that I enjoy, usually I want you guys to read. But I'm gonna get started. This one also is not too long, so I think I'll probably be able to finish it today, but who knows, man? We'll see. Okay, I'm through part 1, which is about 20% probably, and this is good so far, which is especially nice considering what I just endured. We start off very briefly in the early 80s where Ellie receives that letter from her old estranged friend Homa that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. In that letter, it's clear that something is up. Something is wrong, something's changed maybe, but it's just really bizarre that Homa would reach out after all of this time to Ellie, and Ellie doesn't really know what to do with that. But after that opening where Ellie is grappling with the complicated feelings and memories that this letter is bringing up within her, everything else is just chronologically, at least so far, the story of Homa and Ellie's friendship. So we just go straight back into 1950s Tehran as we watch Homa and Ellie meet for the first time at age 7 as they attend an all-girls school for first grade. My favorite part about this book so far is definitely how strongly it reminds me of what it was like to have a best friend when I was growing up, where the rest of the world kind of just perceives you as one unit. And for the most part, you are just one unit, to the point where it's kind of difficult to like know what your identity is outside of that as a kid, especially when you're the Ellie in the relationship, because Homa is a lot more confident and headstrong and impulsive, and Ellie for the most part is just along for the ride, man. Like, she's happy to be there. I was the Ellie for sure when I was growing up. Like, I was very much the perpetual +1. And so reading a book like this, especially written from Ellie's perspective, is reminding me of these memories that I have that I haven't thought about in years. Friendship that is deep like that, where you're kind of just one symbiotic thing, is so formative when you're really young and you're not a whole finished person. And it's not easy to capture that so quickly in a book like this in a way that's believable. But right now, I believe it. I think that the author has done a fantastic job of establishing like the strength of their bond. I do kind of wish that we got a little bit more time with them at this age. I'm about to have a time skip, so we're leaving the part of the story where they're between 7 and 10 years old. But that's not because I don't buy their friendship, or I don't think that the author has done a good enough job with the space that she's taken. I have just found this book to be so strangely nostalgic to read so far, even though like their lives are so different, man. They're living in 1950s Iran, going to an all-girls school. Can't say I've done that. That's a pretty different childhood than the one that I've had, but it's the same feelings. It's just in a different way. So yeah, I'm enjoying this so far. It's not like a 5-star book. I mean, it would be kind of weird if it already was, since I can probably count the amount of books on one hand where I knew in the first 20% that they would end up 5 stars. So it remains to be seen if I end up enjoying this as much as all of the people on the internet, but it's definitely got a much stronger start than the last book that I read in this video, which I appreciate. Okay, 55% or so update. I've also just had dinner, so I am sated. My mind is ready. I'm ready to use my brain to think some thoughts, which is something in the case of this book that I feel like I have to intentionally do, because I mean, it's not like the book isn't meaningful. It's not like there aren't complex themes. Like, this is happening under the backdrop of like the history of Iran in the 60s and 70s. Pretty insane time, right? But at the same time, and I mean this as a compliment, this book is very propulsive. Like, it's super bingeable because it covers such a large swath of Ellie's life. It's super fast paced. There's always stuff happening. So I'm not really having automatically any especially complex thoughts, which makes this check-in kind of weird. I guess maybe what I'll talk about without spoiling anything, because this is a book that I'm liking so far. Now that Ellie is a little bit older, we're seeing a portrait of a friendship that is different from the portrait I was describing earlier on when they were kids, because it turns out that as you get older, people change. And actually, one of the most tragic parts of friendship, I think, is that sometimes it is alarmingly easy for the people that you love the most to completely disappear from your life. They will always be a part of your history of like what made you who you are, but that doesn't mean that what you have with them is always going to be permanent. Or even if you keep it, even if it is still something that's in your life, that doesn't mean that those relationships are going to be the same when you're 25 as they are when you're 10, which is super bittersweet. And Ellie in this book, she clearly loves Homa just as much as she did when they were kids, but she's also older and she's picked up on some of her mother's neuroses. Unfortunately, her mom in this book is really a character, but she's different now as an adult. She has some pretty realistic flaws that mean that she's not really the friend that Homa deserves in a lot of small ways beyond even the larger ones that we get to see towards the end of the second part of this book. And that's a part of the picture. It would be great if I could pretend right now that I've always been the friend that my friends have deserved throughout my life, but that's just not true. And this book does a really good job of asking you to wrestle with that question of what we owe to each other, what we owe to our friends, to the best friends that we have in the world. I also appreciate with this, the way that I always do when I pick up my like 2 historical fiction books a year. You would think that I would make an effort to read anything else from this genre, considering most of the time this is how I feel, but I'm reading a book that's set in a time and a place with reference to real historical events that I do definitely have passing knowledge about. I know a little bit about the Iranian Revolution and also just in general about like what the US did to destabilize Iran, but it's not something that I ever studied in depth outside of school. And obviously reading a work of fiction is not the same thing as actually studying a real historical event, but I think that good authors, through establishing such a strong atmosphere and such a strong time and place for a story like this that is also very wrapped up in the current political moment of that era, a good historical fiction author isn't just using a setting like this as a set piece. It's because they want to write a story that allows for you to engage with all of the complicated people who were affected by events like this. For a lot of people, stories are how we understand the world. They're how we learn to empathize with people who have different experiences from us. And I'm obviously not an expert, I'm not a historian, and even if I were, I'm like super not a historian of Iran, so I can't say about whether or not it's being done well, but my 2 cents as a completely uninformed, like peon normal citizen are, I feel like it's being done respectfully. I feel like it's pretty good, but I don't really want to say much more about it because it's so intertwined with what is happening inside of this book. So I don't know, man. You'll just have to take my word for it. I still like this book. Still probably not a 5-star for me, but especially compared to The List, not to keep sending strays to that poor book, like it is just so much more readable. I'm flying through this. This is a longer book than The List was, but I genuinely think I'm making better time by a factor of like 40 or 50%. I'm gonna keep going. I might just push through to the end of this book. I don't really know. We'll see if I have anything else to say. Okay. I'm done. Surprising absolutely nobody, this was definitely better than The List. I mean, I don't know if I would go so far as to say it was 4.47, but it was a strong 4 stars, I think. I did do a little bit of crying at the end. I'm not made of stone, okay? So if my makeup is fucked up, you know, it's just how the cookie crumbles. I would definitely look into triggers, maybe, if this is something that applies to you, if you're picking this up, because the back half is definitely even more serious than the first half was in a way that's more personal to the characters. But overall, this is a book that reminds me a lot of what I liked about a book like Homegoing by Yak Yassi, with the obvious differences that the 2 girls in this book are not related, they're not sisters, and this book follows just their stories. It's not following their stories and then the stories of all of their descendants. So I don't know, man, maybe it's not like Homegoing at all, but I feel like it still starts off as the same concept, where you have these 2 people who are very closely entwined for a time in history, up until the point when some chance differences dramatically alter the trajectory of where they end up over the course of the following many years. You know, I feel like that core thought experiment is kind of a little bit the same. It's kind of a little bit related, maybe. I did like Homegoing a little bit more than I ended up liking this book, just because I feel like it's a bit more ambitious, but I mean, it's also not at all about friendship. This is a book that is so heavily invested in this question I mentioned earlier of what we owe each other and what our friends deserve from us when we find them in their darkest moments, and about how we fuck that up and then come together together again and make up despite it all. Like, all of that is very particular to what this book is trying to do, and I think it works really well as a friendship story. It's also got this indomitable human spirit sort of thing going on, like women are incredible creatures who are capable of moving mountains, or at least trying to move mountains, because we owe that to ourselves, even if it seems impossible. Like, the epigraph of this book is a quote from this kind of obscure music history book that says, I'll just read it to you, "Ocean waves begin their journey thousands of miles out at sea. Their form, size, and shape come from the speed of prevailing winds in the atmosphere, the power of currents hidden beneath the sea, and their long fetch, the distance between a wave's point of origin and its point of arrival. Events that seem to appear in the present from out of nowhere, in actuality, have a long history behind them." And this book is about how that's also always been true for political, cultural, and social movements as well. There have always been people fighting, and there will always be people fighting for a brighter future for the ones that they love, even if it's at a really great cost to themselves. And that part was a little bit on the nose, maybe, for the first half of this book, but then it ended up being, to me, the most moving part of the entire thing by the end. So I think that the author really pulls through. My biggest qualm with this book is that it's really short, especially for the story that it's trying to tell. Like, this is covering 30 years of history between these two people, and also the history of their country very, very quickly. And because of that, there are moments in this book where you're getting the historical context about what's happening in Iran at the time, but it's in this like little mini PowerPoint slideshow mid-chapter right before going through the rest of the time skip. And parts like that, for me, just end up taking me a little bit out of the story. In my opinion, I feel like this book might have been better served by doing maybe half as many of those pieces of exposition and taking the half that you cut out and adding new chapters of the characters actually exploring and living through and being affected by these events rather than just us hearing about them. But I also kind of get it, you know? I mean, I only barely have context for the history of what's happening in this story, and I know that a lot of people who are picking this up probably know virtually nothing about Iran, especially if they're in America, considering how little America does to like properly educate students, especially when it comes to American sins. So I definitely understand feeling compelled to go into some detail to make sure that you're setting an accurate backdrop for your story. I just kind of wonder if there wasn't a better way sometimes to sort of blend it up and infuse it into the narrative. The way that this book does do for a lot of what's going on, just not everything. Like, there were enough of these extremely expository sequences to sort of take me out of the story, but really only when we were jumping through a lot of years at once in a very short time, which is why I make that comment about the book being a little bit too short to tell the expansive story that I think it set out to tell. A little bit more meat on the bones, and I think it would have solved virtually every problem that I had with the pacing. And I also just kind of yearned for a few more scenes at the end of the book, in that last third when we're back to the 1980s, to the moments after Ellie gets that letter and she finds out why Homa wanted to get into contact with her. I would have loved to see a little bit more of that, because there's a character there who I liked a lot. I still cared about. I still did cry, but I mean, I also think that she was a little bit more underdeveloped than she could have been, with more space to breathe and to experience things on the page. But overall, still really good, man. I still had a good time. This was so much more enjoyable as a reading experience than what I endured yesterday. I would for sure recommend this to any contemporary fiction or historical fiction enjoyers in the chat, maybe to litfic fans, but not 100%, since this book is so fast-paced, it's so plot-driven, and I do think that it lacks a little bit of depth and complexity. Not to say that it isn't deeper complex, because there are parts of this book absolutely that are, but for like hardcore litfic enjoyers, your mileage may vary, man. I hope that you like this book if you decide to pick this up. Best comps are probably things like Homegoing, and then also My Brilliant Friend, which I've never read My Brilliant Friend, so this is such a fake recommendation, but I mean, everything I've ever heard about that series reminds me so strongly of what goes down in this book and the things that it's showing you about deep and complex female friendship. So take that comparison as it is useful to you, but don't hold me to it. But yeah, overall, how do I feel? Do I trust Goodreads even more than I used to? No, I don't think so, but I mean, also I've never trusted Goodreads really, so certainly nothing has gotten worse. I mean, I've just been burned, I think, a few too many times, especially with Goodreads fantasy recommendations. Goodreads average ratings mean almost nothing to me unless they're super outliers like these two books were. But in this case, yeah, this book, not great. Can't say that it was worth my time. I'm remembering now that I'm off my meds, how incensed I got about this book last night, and I honestly don't hate it that much. I think that sometimes I just like to hear myself get mad, but I certainly would not recommend it to like 99% of people. Lion and Women of Tehran, probably a little bit overhyped. I mean, I think that sometimes people don't like rating books like this very badly when they're about things like, you know, the indomitable spirit of women who go through really hard things. Sometimes even if books like that don't rock your world, you end up rating them 5 stars anyways, because so true. And I definitely liked this less than a lot of the other reviewers said that they did, but also my 4 probably is a Goodreads 4.47, so it was still really good. But that's it. Wow, that was fun. It has been a crazy long time since I've done a reading vlog on this channel. I haven't vlogged anything since either last September, if you count my When the Moon Hatched video, but a multi-book reading vlog, if you count a video with 2 books, a multi-book reading vlog, has not been seen on this channel since June 2025, dude. We are so back. We are climbing out of the pits together this year. Anyways, I'm gonna go. I think that you're probably going to see me one more time pretty soon. I think I'm putting out one more shorter video before I get to the really good stuff next month. But thanks for being here. I appreciate you. Okay, I don't have anything else to say. Bye!